Alrighty, today we're going to talk about funding the social services and needs assessment, two critical components of the general profession, and certainly in terms of writing your proposal. So, in general, there are several ways that we fund social services. They sort of exist on a bit on a continuum, from the client to society in general. The most direct way we could do it is self-pay or fee-for-service. But of course, clients often can't pay, so we have issues with that. Charity usually means donations or fundraisers from others. There are insurance payments, and there are what are called competitive grants determined by the grant recipient. There are also things called service contracts. Many of you work in agencies that are funded by service contracts. Each of these processes has some strengths and some limitations. For self-pay, of course, if the person doesn't have the money, they may choose not to go and receive the service. On the other hand, client choice is maximized. If you give a person money, let them make the choice, and it might also limit unnecessary use. Charity, the giver gives good feelings, but it may not be enough to support particularly problems for unpopular issues. In the early days of HIV infection, per se, um, would have been difficult to get funding in some cases. Insurance works, as we all know, pretty much through small payments which protect you from catastrophic costs. The problem with third-party payment is the insurer sets the rules. Competitive grants allows for the most innovation in services, but there may not be funding in some problem areas, and you also have to be skillful to write grants to get them. Service contracts. Oftentimes, when a law is passed by Congress or state legislations, they put in rules associated with contracting to provide a specific service, such as a lot of school-based services. For those of you that work in the Philadelphia region of the COA system, that's an example of sets of services that are provided in a mandated format. So the funding is guaranteed as long as the policy is in effect. The trouble is that the quality of service is determined by the amount of money, so the more money is available, the better the service. And what do we do in areas where we have selected not to provide a service? If there's no mandate there, money has to come from somewhere else. So what we're going to focus on in here as we move through is the competitive grant, but I wanted you to see that there are many different options. In fact, it's a good idea to compare competitive grants to contracts. Service contracts, basically government passes a law and mandates and funds some services. The only thing that needs to be done is to select the agency to implement it. There's very little choice for the agency about what service is provided, who gets the service, what they get. The agency, however, is sometimes very often negotiable. So the federal government or state government will look across agencies and say, we have to provide this service. You can do it, you can do it, you can do it. Here's your money. Let's set up a contract. On the other hand, when governments or private funders have a priority for something that they care about, and they want to make money available to deal with it, they often will put options for competitive grants out there. This is most commonly the case when we don't have a perfect solution for a problem. So instead of mandating a particular service, we allow the agencies to create the service package, and then the funder will look across different proposals, if you will, and decide which one is most worthy of funding. So driving this home, the issue is that many social problems don't have a perfect solution. There may be different causes, different client populations, different interventions, in some cases, no real intervention. Um, in addition, sometimes agencies are doing the right work, but they have to build up their ability to do it, to build up their capacity. They need to train staff, they need more space, more equipment. And then finally, there's some problems that are just new or not well enough known, but we know there's a problem there, so we want to make some money available to deal with it. So the competitive grant process is what we'll be focusing on for the next couple of modules here. There are many different types of grants. There are grants that are there for capacity building to help the agency improve its services. There are grants that are available for research. There's money that's available sometimes for endowment to help you build your long-term sustainability. There's money available for planning. And then the ones that are most useful to us in many cases are the demonstration grant or the implementation or service grant. For these, money is provided to try the service, to pay for the service per se. So what we're going to be focusing on here largely are the capacity grants, the demonstration grants, or the implementation or service grants. That's mostly what you all are going to be concerned about. Process. Money can come from both governmental or non-governmental sources. Foundations, for instance, may have some priorities that they would like to give money for. Or again, government pass a law that provides some money to deal with the issues in new ways. So somehow this money has to get to agencies. So we're going to discuss this process here briefly. But first, it's worthwhile understanding that there are some differences between government money and foundations money. First of all, there are literally thousands, I have hundreds here, but there are literally thousands of foundations out there that can provide money for agencies to do things. Government also has large amounts of money. Sometimes huge amounts of money are available. But both of them also have some limitations. Government grants are more competitive. There are more agencies seeking a fewer number of grants. Again, they may be lots of money, but they're hard to get a hold of. For foundations, because there are literally thousands of sources, choosing and sifting the one that's perfect for your agency may be difficult. As there are many different agencies, thousands, it's worthwhile noting some of the different kinds of foundations. These, by the way, to drive the point, are nonprofit foundations. They have been established to help provide funding or services for problems that certain groups of people see important. There are family foundations. They're created by a family that makes lots of money and wants to give some of it away. The Rockefeller Foundation or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are examples. There are corporate foundations. You're all familiar with McDonald's Charities, or there are large ones like GM Trust that have money that the organization foundation receives from a company. There are also community foundations, the Philadelphia Foundation, primarily to give money to agencies that serve in the Philadelphia area. There are also general purpose foundations like the United Way and advocacy foundations. Again, all of these have money available for you to do services, to do capacity building, things like that. The question becomes, how do you find out about them? How do you find the one that is perfect for your needs? Well, the process is fairly straightforward. You have to find a source. Whether it's through government policy or through a foundation, the public must be notified that money is available. And this is commonly done through something called an RFP, which stands for Request for Proposals, a FOA, a Funding Opportunity Announcement, or a NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability. Or if you want to get really silly, there are things called SuperNOFAs, which when they put many NOFAs together into one big funding source. How do you find the funding? Pretty straightforward. You have to do research. You have to develop a plan, find an RFP that best fits your project, submit a proposal, and hope you're selected. So let's take a look at some of the ways that you determine what's appropriate for you. First of all, you have to read these RFPs. There are literally thousands of them that are produced every year, and it's important to remember that not all RFPs, not all foundations fund all kinds of projects. Funders have interests. They look for specific kinds of things they want to fund. What is in an RFP? Many things that will be useful to you, such as what will be funded, the types of organizations that are eligible, the problem areas, client characteristics, geography, types of interventions. They will also tell you what is not funded. Some programs do not fund specific types of activities. Many of them have limitations on overhead. Many of them have limitations on construction. Most don't allow for lobbying. And they will also tell you what the time frame for the grant is. What's the minimum, maximum grant, and what is the average grant. Time frames, usually 1 to 3 years, sometimes renewable, sometimes not. So how do you find an RFP? Well, you got to do some research. Fortunately, we live in the computer age. What used to be a difficult process of doing library research is now done online. Of course, each funder often has its own web page, and when you learn about a funder that typically funds the kind of things you want to do, you can go to that page. But there are many web sites that also compile from lots of sources. The next page shows you a few. Something called the Society of Nonprofits. You could go to that website. The Philanthropy Network of Greater Philadelphia. You can go to that site. If you want to know about government grants, you can go to grants.gov. Many other organizations that provide information about foundations. But the point is, if you go to these, and I strongly encourage you to do this, whether you're going to do this class project for real or not, and you do not have to do this for real, remember that. If you do the class project for real, go to these sites and try surfing through them to find one that might be appropriate for the kind of work you want to do. Not required, repeat, not required, but you may choose to do it. Once you find your source, however, things start to get a little more interesting. Now, most proposals, and similar to what you're going to be writing for this class, have some common characteristics. They all have a title or cover page. They all have an introduction or summary. They all have a statement of need. They all have goals and objectives, procedures, a budget and a budget narrative, an evaluation plan, and they may have letters of support required or appendices and certifications. In the next couple of classes, we're going to go over these things in great detail. Today, we're going to move on in the next lecture to talk about the first piece of it, the statement of need. This ends today's first lecture on funding. There will be another one immediately after this that picks up at the next part of this that deals with needs assessments.